Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
A food neutral approach kind of asks 3 questions when it comes to making food decisions. And it's, do I like the taste, smell, texture of this food? How do I feel after I eat this food? And then, does this food support my overall well-being? And so I think that last question kind of encapsulates the, am I eating this food in a mindful way that supports my goals, my health, my habits, my routines, my mental and physical well-being? Hey, hi, hello. This is Meredith. You're listening to the Afternoon Snack Podcast. I'm here with Alex. Alex, say hello.
Hello.
Alrighty. Today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about Alex's half Ironman training. Not a ton. She will have done the race by now, so I'm sure you've seen on social media how it went. I'm assuming it went great because it's her and a sporting event. And then we're going to get into kind of an interesting topic on our relationship with food. Not our relationship with food, but like our relationship with food as humans and some different ways of thinking about that, more productive ways. And is it even good to have a good relationship with food? You know what I mean? It's a complicated topic and therefore kind of a nuanced and complicated episode, but I think you'll like it. We liked it, and we'll get right into it. Alex,
Meredith.
welcome. We're both on the podcast couch.
I know.
We were talking to somebody about the podcast couch recently and how like you have to be kind of a original podcast listener to understand the podcast couch.
Yeah. You know, it's lasted.
We've sold some furniture and we have not sold this.
Probably because no one would buy it. We know no one would buy it, so it's why even try?
No.
And it does look good because it's like, it is pretty low profile.
It's aesthetic.
Yeah.
It fits in this room, which not every couch
It is a
would
tiny
fit.
room.
For example, the other white one that we're selling would not fit in this room. At least not well. Rue has also joined us today. I think she recognizes her mistake.
Yeah, she's lying by the door.
She wanted to come in, and so I let her in, and then I closed the door. And I think as soon as she realized she wasn't going to be loud on the couch, she's like, "Okay, I gotta go." But now she can't. So she's trapped. But on the bright side, she's away from Joe.
I knew you were going to say that. Rue likes Joe.
Sometimes. But Joe is like to the point where she's so much bigger than Rue. She outweighs Rue by like 30 pounds. But she's still a puppy. So she still does really puppy things. So like grab a hunk of Rue's neck and just like toss her around. And she's like a small...
Okay, Rue's fine.
I know.
Joe's growing on Rue.
She is. Rue is
Everyone gets along. It's fine.
Abundantly patient. Anyways, we're getting in some podcasts early because we're going away next week for your race.
For my half Ironman.
Your half Ironman.
I'm glad I'm not doing the full.
You could definitely do the full.
I know I could.
Yeah.
I'm physically capable of doing both the half well and the full. But I am somebody who worries a lot about logistics, even for running races. It's like, well, where are we going to park? How far is it to walk? What time do we need to leave? Is it going to be busy?
I saw this anxiety sink in yesterday.
How many porta potties are there going to be? What are the lineups for the porta potties going to be? That sort of thing. Like, am I going to be able to go to the bathroom in the morning? I am very worried about that for the Ironman because we have to get on a shuttle at like 4:30.
Do I have to get on the shuttle?
You do.
What?
Spectators have to get on.
Are you serious?
You can't park up there. I know. I was going to let you know earlier. So yeah, there's a lot of logistics. Even dropping off your bags. I'm stressed because I've never done it before. Physically, I feel good. I don't feel great. Like, how much time do I need to put on my wetsuit before the swim? Because you have to leave your wetsuit there.
Oh.
Yeah, because you have to dump it in water in some sort of solution when you check in because they don't want there to be any sort of weird contamination for the lake.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so you dunk it and then you have to leave it there.
Yeah.
And then you get it the next morning. You also have to like drop off your stuff near your bike, go check your bike. It just seems like there's a lot to do in the morning. So hopefully I can go to the bathroom and do all this stuff.
We'll bring the AeroPress. We'll have some really strong sort of espresso grade coffee.
Yeah.
It'll be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm feeling good physically. I'm not feeling good about logistics.
But you have me, and I'm a logistics expert.
Yeah, you are, except you haven't read any of the instructions.
I told you I would.
Okay. I'll send you the athlete handbook, which I already read through line by line.
Too busy. I've been like doing logistics for like your bike and your gear.
Yeah, I know. You're helping a lot.
Thank you. The right tires.
Yeah.
And things like this.
And I wore my tri-suit for the first time in training today.
You did, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this will actually come out after the Ironman, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
It went great.
Yeah.
You crushed it. You finally invited me for a swim the other day.
Well, because I do swim club.
You do.
Which you have to be a member of because you pay for it. But it's at 8 p.m. on Wednesday nights, which it's nice in some ways because it doesn't get in the way of anything that I do.
Yeah.
Because it's at 8 p.m. It does get in the way of my wind down time.
Yeah.
So I don't sleep particularly well after swimming.
And like, I mean, imagine the impact to me. I basically just wander around the house for like 90 minutes until you get back.
I know. And sometimes I bring ice cream back. So then that's like an extra like 20 minutes enjoying the ice cream with everyone.
Yeah. And like, I'm to this point where, because when you're training for Ironman, and this is kind of always the case too with marathon training really ramps up, but Ironman's even more, like your volume is so high that really sort of calories just matter a lot, where like regardless of where they're coming from. So Dairy Queen is actually a really great option because it's calorie dense.
And it's on the way home.
It's on the way home, doesn't upset your stomach, but you always show up with 2 cups of ice cream. You get like 1 for me.
Well, no, I get 2 for me because I don't know which flavor to get. I am torn between butterscotch / caramel and hot fudge.
I'm going to stop you. Have you ever asked them to mix them?
No, I would never do that.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely not.
Really?
No.
Oh.
I was that kid. You can't mix flavors. Like Slurpees, you could only get one kind.
Okay, but explain then how you ever rationalized frozen yogurt.
It stays more separate. I would never get the swirl frozen yogurt. Well, maybe if it was like chocolate vanilla.
Well,
but this isn't. There's already a chocolate vanilla mix, and then there's a caramel vanilla mix.
Okay.
You can't have 3 flavors.
I mean,
because you have to consider the ice cream.
With a very expert handler, you could have sort of a... And then they could know it was you and be like, oh, Alex is here for her tri-flavor ice cream. Anyways, go on.
At that point, wouldn't you just get a banana split?
I would never, ever let a banana touch my ice cream. And here's the thing about banana splits that is absolutely appalling. Like, have you ever eaten a banana, like, cut vertically, like, lengthwise?
I haven't. I do cut it lengthwise, and then I cut it widthwise for my cereal.
Yeah, but you don't like flay it open and look at it.
No.
Because it's got like the seeds.
Well, yeah, it looks like fruit.
I don't know. It's just like, it's no.
Okay. I would never order a banana split for a different reason. It's a strawberry flavor. Who needs that?
Why is there strawberry? What kind of banana split are you getting?
Isn't a banana split chocolate, caramel, and strawberry? In a banana?
I don't know.
Split banana?
I've actually just only ever seen pictures of them because like I just don't ever even want to be near a banana
split. I would never order a banana split, but now I'm questioning whether or not. Yeah, here it is. So it's a banana split in half. And it's got 3 scoops of ice cream. I guess it depends. This would obviously be different at Dairy Queen, but you have 3 different types of ice cream in this photo. You have vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. So I'm guessing if I were to Google banana split Dairy Queen, it's probably all vanilla soft serve. Yeah, I was right.
Okay.
So it does have the strawberry.
Oh, okay. I see.
And that's why I would never get it. It also seems to have some sort of lemon. Maybe it's not caramel.
I don't know. That all sounds bad.
That's why I have to get 2 sundaes. The caramel one and the chocolate one, because I cannot decide.
Okay.
And one time I ordered the wrong thing. And you got the chocolate sundae, and I have regrets forever now.
My favorite is the one time
I ordered an Oreo Blizzard.
Oh, yeah.
And it was basically like a cup of Oreos.
Which, like, delicious in its own way, but when you want ice cream, it's not. My favorite is when we went to Dairy Queen one time, and you were like, well, what's the difference? There's like a fudge sundae and then a hot fudge sundae.
No, it was chocolate and hot fudge.
Oh, okay. Chocolate and hot fudge. And you were like, well, what's...
No, that you asked.
Did I? Was it me? When I asked, like, what the difference was?
Yeah.
And she was basically like, well, one's hot and one isn't. And I was like, cool. Thank you. So if I wanted a chocolate sundae,
what did you end up ordering?
Heat it up. I think I got a hot fudge sundae.
Because that's the classic.
Yeah. Like with hot fudge, there's like a time element because you can't just like get a hot fudge sundae and then, mill around. otherwise it'll melt your ice cream. So you have to eat it like with some urgency, which is kind of how I eat ice cream anyways.
So anyways, I bring ice cream home.
You do, but
also for the viewers out there, listeners, you can get pup cups at Dairy Queen.
But they're just ice cream.
I know, it's a tiny little bit of ice cream, but it's actually not. It's like a full scoop of soft serve. So it's a lot of ice cream for the dogs.
Giving that much ice cream to a dog.
It was a lot.
I like Starbucks.
So now we just give some of the sundae to the dogs.
Cream. Yeah, but without the chocolate.
Yeah.
Even though chocolate in that quantity wouldn't really make... Anyways, the whole point of saying that is like you are in a dessert phase because you have to eat, which... Like, so I'm kind of having to actively avoid being in a dessert phase because I'm not training for a half Ironman. Like, my training volume is kind of normal.
And Meredith's active avoidance of dessert phases, we were leaving to go home from dinner the other night. And I'm like, and now to Dairy Queen. And you just said no.
I was like, no. Well, partially because there was Dairy Queen from literally the night before still in the freezer.
I know, we didn't finish it, but it was old soft serve.
Well, whatever.
Okay. Also, one time I was like, I think I want to go to Dairy Queen. And you were like, okay. And then just drove by. And I was like, well, and you were like, too late.
I forgot. And it wasn't, I think I want to go. You were like waffling about it.
I know.
And I just didn't participate in the decision-making conversation because I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
Because again, not training for a half Ironman. And it's not like my thing. But if it's put in front of me because I'm a human being with taste buds, I tend to eat it.
Yeah.
So I have to sort of like, I'd rather not.
Fair.
Or like if it comes home, I just have to go away.
But I also enjoy those foods more when you enjoy them with me. It's a thing. And then the other day I went to the grocery store and you were like, you got mini eggs and gummy bears?
The gummy bears are legit.
I know.
Wait, remind me to ask you about that later. Why you enjoy foods more when I eat them.
Okay.
But you did invite me on the swim.
Yes.
Recently.
Back to that.
And partially, I think because you didn't want to go late. Because like you're in that phase of training where you're really into like we're overreaching and now we're kind of into super compensating, like, so you're tired.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah. So you invited me because there's some open water swimming technique that I thought I could help you with.
And that isn't focused on in swim club.
Yeah. And I guess if people are unaware, that's my sporting background is I grew up a swimmer. And so it was kind of like, you get to not go to 8 p.m. swim club, and you also get to maybe refine some technique that will be helpful on race day. So we did that.
So you basically say, okay, well, what do you usually do for a warm up? And I tell you, and then you're like, okay, just swim 200 freestyle. I'll watch your first 50.
Yeah.
So I get back and you're just like, you've got that smirk on your face. Not that dissimilar to what you had on your face when I walked in with my haircut that was too short.
It wasn't that bad.
And you were like, okay, yes. Now go again.
Yeah.
So my brain's like, I'm a horrible swimmer. I should drop out of the 70.3. But you recovered. You were like, there are things that we can do, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And you did help me.
I think it's probably like
I was really worried because you started getting into like real technique stuff. And I was worried I was going to get like overcoached and then like get in my head.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like if you're going into a golf tournament, you don't want someone to change your swing.
No.
But swimming's a little different.
Yeah. For most people, it doesn't matter what you're told. Like your ability to actually change things is really limited. The reason why I watched you the first time and the second was it was kind of like, hey, what's going to be the most impactful change or like thing to think about, which is what that was.
But you've given me some tips over the course of the last 3 months, even not even seeing me swim, that has been helpful.
Like what?
Well, remember when I told you the coach said my hand was slipping, but didn't give me a cue?
Yeah.
So then I just became very hyper aware of my hand slipping.
When you say hand slipping,
it means, okay, so if you're swimming horizontal and your hand comes down so that it's perpendicular?
Yeah, just like comes straight under your body.
So your armpit's at a 90-degree angle and then you push on the water. Slipping means your hand kind of like wobbles side to side.
You create like an S
shape. Which
yeah.
means it's not efficient. So like, you know, one of the things is you open your hand up. I was swimming with my fingers together, which makes no sense. And then you said to keep your thumb down, which really helps me not slip.
Yeah.
So that was something that you helped.
Okay. Yeah. You're essentially like a paddle. And so if you push straight down the waters, like you're creating leverage. Yeah. So you create a channel, turning your thumb in a bit.
I was never good at physics.
And hydrodynamics is like extra hard physics.
Yeah. I would never be able to pass that course.
Yeah, it's just fun. Did you know air is considered a fluid as well and behaves in much the same way as water when something moves through it?
No.
Yeah. So like the whole reason why airplanes fly aside from having like big jets, is the way that the plane wing is shaped, because it's flat on the bottom,
I knew that.
Curved on the top, which creates basically a pressure differential because the air moves faster over the curved part of the plane,
right? Of course,
which creates loft and like a low pressure situation under the wing, and that's what causes the plane to go up.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't know that?
I would say, but for like a swimmer who's not a swimmer, you're actually like a decent swimmer.
Thanks.
I
did get a compliment on my stroke at swim club once.
Oh, yeah?
Not from a coach.
Okay. I was like, what?
There have been people who are like, are you a triathlete? A coach once was like, are you a triathlete? And I was like, well, kind of. And she was like, oh, yeah, I can tell because you don't really kick. I was like, oh, didn't notice.
You do kick. The problem is your feet are so low, you just don't see it, which was something that...
Yeah, we practiced that too.
Yeah. You sort of struggle with all the like typical things that people, which is like your legs sinking, your head's up a little bit too much.
And my head used to be way more up.
That's crazy to me. I wonder, do you have an issue with like holding pressure in your nose? Like,
I don't know.
Because some people, when your head's really flat, you get water will just like enter your nostrils and people don't like the way that feels. And so they pull their heads
No, it's
up.
not that. I think it's just years and years of very limited swimming, but over the course of 35 years. That's what's comfortable, is having my head up.
Yeah. The best part of the session, or most entertaining, was we were working on a few things. We were working on like a more of a hip driven stroke, which is something that long distance swimmers move to that type of stroke versus a shoulder driven stroke. So I was giving you some drills for that. And then in doing that, I was like, like your feet are still sinking. So you're sort of limiting the effectiveness of that stroke technique because your hips are so low. So I was like, I know, we'll use the fins, which can help with hip driven stroke sort of drills and technique. And then also it's way easier to float your feet with fins because your kick is usually a little more powerful, or a lot more powerful with fins. So
you'd think.
I know you've been doing kicking drills with the kickboard, which is great, but sometimes that exaggerates the feet, like the hips low, feet low, because like it just tilts everything up, right? Because it floats. So I showed you the kick drill where basically your hands are out front and you're sort of kicking with your face down in the water, and then you only take a stroke when you need to breathe. So you sort of kick that way. So I was like, do this and focus on like extending your hips. It should float your feet right away. And I was like, I'm going to watch you from underneath, and had been watching you from underneath the surface just to like pay attention. The kind of coaching that you only get from your significant other. I'm going to watch you from under the water.
I know it's because you just like me in a one piece.
Yes. So we were on the deep end of the pool, swimming back towards the shallow end, which whatever, doesn't matter. Turns out it does matter.
It's a good thing I wasn't on the shallow end.
I know.
I would have had a big skin on my forehead.
You kick off to do this drill, kicking, and I like go underwater to watch you, and you're kicking like straight down. Not straight down, but angling down towards
and I'm
the
like,
bottom.
why can't I feel my heels on the surface?
Yeah.
So I'm just like kicking
You're
harder.
Like, weird. It must just be a
which
fin
is like
thing.
getting,
You were
exactly
cooking. And then I'm like, what in the hell? And then you go to like take your stroke.
Because I was like, I got to take a breath. Like, I'm dying here.
You got to do that to take a stroke to breathe. And I see this. You're probably like a good 6 feet under the water at this point, and your arm comes around like you're going to like take a breath. And then it was just like, you realize like, hey, where's the air? And it was just like, you broke out of the stroke. I think you looked straight up, and then fortunately had fins on. So you got to the surface quite quickly. And you were just like, I think we were both dying laughing at that point.
The woman in the lane next to us, I think, was like, what is happening over there?
What are they doing? I just had so many questions. Like, how are your eyes closed? Number one, how do you not realize like the perception of...
Okay, this is what may have happened.
I'm actually so curious.
Okay, because you're going deep to shallow. Maybe it was just going deep to shallow, but faster, and it wasn't enough for me to notice. Do you know what I mean? I was getting closer to the bottom of the pool, thinking that I was just making my way towards the shallow end.
Really fast.
Okay, in my defense, I've never had fins on before.
See, I didn't know that.
Okay, so you would think, they are very powerful. I was like, wow, this is fast.
Okay, yeah. I guess I also, like, you hear the surface of the water.
Yeah.
You can also feel splashy, like on your shoulders, with your feet. And so for me, whenever I don't hear splashy, I'm like, oh, I'm under the water right now.
I don't know. I just don't have good awareness in the water, I guess.
I guess it's kind of like you when I'm skiing and you're like, get out of the back seat. And I'm like, well, what is the back seat?
Yeah. Or like
that.
when I'm like, just turn down the hill and you do all the same turns to the right.
You're like, I'm actually in a right-hand turn only sort of mood.
Yeah.
Because that's steep.
But it was good. It was cool. Because I think with being in a winter town, often, I mean, you've always been better than me at like lifting and gymnastics. So you've coached me a lot in those areas with CrossFit.
Mm.
But I think since moving to a winter town, we've been doing a lot of mountain biking and a lot of skiing. And like mountain biking, you're maybe better than me on the up, but I'm definitely better downhill and like on things, like on jumps and things. So I'll help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm certainly better than you at skiing. So I've kind of been the person that's better, I guess, especially in the winter.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to flip the script and see you in your element and like get some coaching.
Yeah.
You did make me do one length with my eyes closed.
Oh,
and I was like, I got this. I had so much confidence.
Did you?
I was like, I swim straight all the time. What's the difference?
Yeah.
And I think I got halfway. And what stopped me is I absolutely smashed my finger into the lane. And there's a black spot on my nail.
Oh.
But at least that was helpful because now I know like I have a tendency to like go right.
Yeah.
So that when I correct, likely going to be correcting left.
Right. And so it's like, that's super helpful.
Yeah.
Because most people will. Like
Yeah.
I kind of go subtly to the left.
Yeah.
I don't go quite as hard as you do, but it does help to know either you would start aiming left of your marker, or when I spot, I'm going to be spotting to the left and correcting to the left always.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to go to the right. Whereas like a lot of people don't think about that.
And you taught me how to sight. And I'm glad you did because I was doing this. I didn't tell you this yesterday, but when I practiced sighting the other day when I was by myself in the pool, I did a regular turn to my right to breathe. And then before I went under, I would look straight. So it was like a full like around the world situation.
Are you serious? Oh my God.
And you're like, you showed me and I was like, in my head, I'm like, this makes a lot more sense.
This looks easier.
I don't know what I looked like in the pool.
Have enjoyed watching that.
But you're like, you just need to go straight and breathe straight.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. You don't always have to breathe to the side.
Yeah. And you don't even have to breathe. You can just like get your eyeballs out if it's flat. Or if it's not flat, then you want to breathe. You just pick your head up. Because you can front crawl with your head straight. It's awful technique. I mean, your feet definitely sink in that case. But it's like lifeguard swim.
Yeah. I noticed that yesterday in the show we're watching, which we'll do a review on when we're done. Because it does have Kate Blanchett in it. So it garners a review.
Speaking of, the Agatha review is coming.
Yeah.
We forgot to do that in the last episode, but
because we had a guest on it.
Right. We have finished Agatha all along. We're not going to talk about it now. Well, we are going to talk about it in an upcoming episode.
Maybe we'll just do all show reviews on that episode.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the point.
Okay.
That's the topic.
Let's move on.
Yeah. So I guess what we wanted to talk briefly about today, because it came up, and because we work with a lot of people who have an evolving view of food, relationship of food, they interact with food in different ways. I thought we would talk about what the right relationship with food is, or how it can look, and
what is a good relationship with food?
Yeah.
Or right.
Or appropriate.
Yeah.
Or what does it look like to live with food in a positive way? And so much of that is language. And so that's kind of why we're sitting here beating around the bush with language. Let's talk really quick, because this would be a neat backdrop. You said earlier that you enjoy eating things like ice cream, sundaes, more if I'm eating them.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
That's a really good question. I would say, and I haven't given this a ton of thought, but I am not someone who gets a lot of enjoyment from the act of eating.
Explain that.
Like when clients explain to me, like, I just really love food. I really like feeling full. I just really enjoy the taste and eating. It makes me feel good, and feel good can be different stuff. Sometimes it's like comforting. Sometimes it's just, I really love food. Some people say, I think I'm addicted to it. I just really love sugar, whatever. I think for a lot of people, it's comforting. Whereas like I grew up with a sister who she ended up getting a really bad eating disorder. And my mom, if you've ever listened to her episode, she also had some disordered eating, like a lot of binge eating stuff. And my dad was the opposite. He's like me, where like food serves a different purpose for us. It doesn't serve the purpose of comfort or enjoyment. I like food for what it does for me. Like I enjoy my meals because I know it's satiating and it makes me, be able to do activities and that sort of thing. I do enjoy the taste of food, certain foods more than others. I like going out. I'm not like one of those people who really enjoys fancy meals because I don't find a lot of value in food. What I do enjoy is sharing good food with other people. Like it's like, I like eating ice cream, but I don't necessarily think I would eat ice cream for the enjoyment of it by myself because I really like ice cream. I would eat ice cream by myself if I'm like, oh, I'm really hungry. I'm going to bed. I'm just going to have a few bites of ice cream. But it's like, I don't know. Maybe there's something deeper there.
But what is it about me eating like a Dairy Queen sundae that increases your enjoyment of the Dairy Queen sundae that you wanted?
I mean, maybe there's part of it that's like, there's a possibility that I feel less bad about eating it if somebody else is eating it with me.
So you think there might be some belief there that there's an issue with that food, even though you want it and like you see the benefit in eating it from like overall goal standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, there's that possibility. I don't think it's that because I will get food that is deemed less nutritious by myself.
Yeah.
In order to meet calorie intake.
Yeah.
Like ice caps from Tim Hortons, donuts. I'll get these things by myself and eat them as a form of like, oh, I'll just have a couple donuts because that's an easy 200 calories.
Yeah.
That's not something I do a lot, but if, I'm out. So, there maybe is part of that. But for example, like Christmas cookies or birthday cake.
Yeah.
I like enjoying that. I enjoy that it brings people together, that kind of food.
That's definitely like, you wouldn't go so far as to call it cultural, but there's a meaningful backdrop to those things, like the Christmas cookies. Probably.
It's like, here's my thing.
Okay.
Like when we enjoy Christmas cookies, and maybe this is just how I grew up, like I would never just eat a whole cookie by myself. I do eat like a chocolate chip cookie probably every day with my lunch. I eat that by myself. But Christmas cookies, what we do is we split the cookie. We all take a bite of it. Yeah. We eat them together and we enjoy that flavor of cookie together, and then we move on to the next one. And it's the same thing with mini cupcakes in our family. And it was the same thing when I was a kid, when we would eat little donuts that my grandma would bring over on Tuesdays for dinner, for dessert. We wouldn't just get a donut. My mom would cut the donuts up into small pieces so that you could get different flavors and we could all share the different types of flavors together. So I wonder if it's more just my upbringing and that being the ritual with dessert-like foods.
Maybe, because I found at first,
I know you thought it was really weird.
Like cutting cupcakes and cookies into little bits appalling. I was like, no, what?
And now you do it.
Yeah. It doesn't hold any meaning for me. I just do it because it's what's done.
Yeah. It was difficult cutting because there's 4 of us. So when we cut a mini cupcake, and these cupcakes are small, like the cupcakes alone you could fit into your mouth. And then we invited 2 more people over one night for dinner when we had cupcakes. And I was like, shoot, we're going to have to cut these into 6.
Either 6 or thirds. Because you do like 2. It's very complicated watching that unfold. Yeah.
I'm glad we got to the bottom of that. I think it is just my ritual.
Yeah, which is fine. That's part of it. But I do think, the idea of food relationships, I think you have to sort of consider the diet culture angle and if that plays a role. And so, I mean, when you think about how people relate to the food that they eat, just hearing that sentence, you're like, well, why should people be relating to food? Like fundamentally. So that's like, put that to the side. But the way that a lot of people think about food is very binary, like good or bad. Mm-hmm. There's good foods, there's bad foods, there's health foods, there's junk foods, there's treats, there's natural foods. Food has so many labels that have nothing to do with the food itself. It doesn't mention at all even what the food is. It's just like a label. Sometimes it's even on the label, natural. So I read something or I heard something that sort of got me thinking about this and how even the concept of having a quote unquote good relationship with food is kind of also diet culture, because that implies like that there is a bad relationship with food. It's binary, even defining, even saying, oh, I have a good relationship with food. And like it implies a certain amount of surveillance going on to be able to assess that. Like diet culture is sort of built on some level of fixation on the diet. Like when you think about it, what diet culture is and how it shows up for people, there's always an element of over fixation. So if you fixate on what type of relationship you have with food, it's possible then that your relationship with food is still being dictated or falls under the umbrella of diet culture. So I think that a lot of people that believe that they have a good relationship with food still operate like with some food rules going on in the background. That's what I think.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that.
Like even you mentioned your dad. You're like, oh, me and my dad have a different thing with food.
It's different. It is a relationship still.
Yeah. And I think that there's certainly some food rules going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Not you necessarily, but...
Oh, I'm sure I do.
Yeah.
And even like eating foods, sharing certain foods, it could be considered a food rule.
Uh-huh. Like, I can only enjoy this if I'm sharing it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, why? And then you do all kinds of justification on why. You're like, well, it's because it's a ritual and it's cultural and it's what my family does. But maybe part of what your family does and has been passed down is a food rule.
Yeah.
And it's this disordered way of interacting with that particular type of food, specifically that particular type of food. Because you don't do that with salads. You don't do that with proteins. You do that with desserts.
No, we do it with most foods. But yeah, I get
not
it.
In the same
I get
way.
it.
And I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying like...
No, I completely understand.
If like the way that you interact with one specific subset of food is very different than the way that you interact with other foods, you have to at least entertain the idea that there's something a little deeper going on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like if, I hose a burger and then I also happen to hose like a creme brulee in the exact same fashion, it's being treated the same way.
Mm-hmm.
That's not me saying that I have a superior relationship with food. It's just highlighting a difference.
Yeah. I guess to throw this out there, I would say that given the food culture, our society, and our fixation on food and body weight and health, because that often goes hand in hand, we'll talk about that. It is extremely rare to have no relationship with food these days. So I think people are labeling their relationship with food good, or they want to improve it in a way to say, I don't want my relationship with food, how I see food, how I make decisions around food, to negatively impact my life anymore. Because some people, their relationship with food is not good in that it impacts their day-to-day life in a negative way. So I think that's where people get the good, bad, or like, improve if it's on a scale, which you're saying it doesn't necessarily need to be. But the like no relationship with food, I'm conceptualizing this as that's not even on the scale.
Yeah,
and to me,
like
that's
the
like
Buddhism of food.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's
like,
hard to achieve.
Well, you certainly can't achieve it from a place of like very, very problematic behavior and like eating patterns.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about where are we starting and where can we go, even if where we go first is not like an end point. It gets us closer to being able to move towards like a neutral mindset with food.
Kind of like, would you say that's similar to like a neutral relationship with your body, which is like, there's not things that you hate or really like dislike or want to control. It's just like your body is, and you just accept it.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with the idea of body neutrality as a concept because I think that you're allowed to have things about yourself that aren't your favorite. And so it's not like not having feelings. It's kind of like if you want to draw a connection between neutrality and like Buddhism, if we want to make that connection, the goal of, let's say, being awake or enlightenment is not avoiding negative thoughts or avoiding suffering. It's having feelings and being able to have that experience, notice them, and then let them go.
Yeah, and that's what I would say is neutrality.
Yeah.
Not have feelings. I think that's impossible.
Right.
It's like you can't control what comes up for you, but you can control how you respond to it. So it's like, there's a lot of people in this world who are dissatisfied with something about their body or their hair or whatever. That's okay. I think a lot of people want the goal to be that they love everything about themselves.
Right.
And I think that's really hard to achieve.
Yeah.
Instead, you work towards like, hey, I have this dissatisfaction, but that's okay. I'm not going to let it impact my day.
I'm not going to make my suffering from it worse.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's kind of the like, I'm going to feel it and then I'm going to move past it or move through it or however you want to conceptualize it.
But you're saying like a relationship with food, no relationship with food is not even having any feelings around it.
I mean, it is having feelings. You are going to like certain foods. You are going to dislike certain foods. You're going to make choices on what you eat based on how those foods make you feel. But the idea is like, you're not making choices
Feel
based
beyond
on
flavor.
Right.
So what if it's like I'm just throwing this out there. I don't want to create anything for anyone. But what if it's a very high calorie food and you know that this food is contributing to potentially weight gain? That has an impact on how you feel.
Right. So if you're looking at food rules, people who make decisions on what they want to eat, or specifically, do you avoid foods because you fear that they're going to lead to weight gain?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a food rule. There's like a whole host of food rules, but that's one. And so let's say we all know that very, very high calorie foods can certainly be consumed, but if they're consumed beyond a point, then they can have adverse effects to health. They can lead to weight gain. Weight gain itself is not innately bad. It just, it is something that happens if you consume more calories than you expend on average over a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, some people need to gain weight.
Right. So we're not saying that like gaining weight is bad, but a food neutral approach kind of asks 3 questions when it comes to making food decisions. And it's, do I like the taste, smell, texture of this food? How do I feel after I eat this food? And then does this food support my overall well-being? And so I think that last question kind of encapsulates the, am I eating this food in a mindful way that supports my goals, my health, my habits, my routines, my mental and physical well-being? And so something like a bone marrow dish, or something very like high in calorie dense that you might get at a very fancy restaurant, eating with family, friends, in celebration of a work promotion, whatever. That can be a food that you really, really love the taste, texture, smell of. It can be a food that is very enjoyable to eat, both because of the way that it tastes, but also because of the environment in which it's eaten. So there's like a cultural component there. And you can answer, does this support my overall well-being? Knowing that you only eat that kind of food on very special occasions, that yes, it does support your overall well-being, but also knowing if that were to shift and it were to become more often, it would not support your overall well-being. So there is awareness of like, there's a balance. There's a point at which this food that is productive for my well-being, both physically and mentally, might become unproductive if I consume too much of it, because it pushes me out of productive calorie intake and micro and macronutrient intake.
That's kind of how I feel about alcohol.
Yeah. But that's kind of like, you know, someone who doesn't have a positive relationship with food or isn't able to like navigate that like food neutral questions may not really even be able to experience joy around eating foods that they might very much enjoy, because they can't get out of the way of those food rules. Like, I'm afraid of eating this because I might gain weight. I'm afraid of eating this because I believe that it's bad. These things that people live with.
What I'm hearing here is you could essentially have, if we're talking about the bone marrow, there seems to be some like linguistics.
100%.
So if you say, okay, this food, because it's being served at work dinners that I go to twice a week, is not serving my goals or my overall wellness anymore. Even though I enjoy the taste, I enjoy the texture, I enjoy the smell, I love this food, it's not serving my goals or my wellness, then that would be considered objective.
It could be, yeah. And it may not even be that it's like not serving my physical goals. It may be this very special food and experience is becoming less special because I'm experiencing it too often. It's kind of like, I don't want to live at the beach because I want the beach to be a place that I look forward to going.
Yeah. So then, but a food, if you're taking that same example and we're talking about what a food rule would look like, that might be, I would never eat bone marrow because it's really high in fat.
Yeah. Or I can't eat it.
Or I can't eat it. Or that food will make me gain weight.
Yeah.
And food rules can be macronutrient based too.
100%.
Not just food based.
Yeah, they often are.
Yeah.
Like, and you hear this a lot in certain friend circles or family circles, you know, like, oh, isn't that really high in fat? Like, you hear people project their food rules onto you, and it's really easy to do that. And you can always tell how people are with food because they're obviously not taking a moment to consider, I guess, the way that food is in your life. And the context of all the decisions that you might be making around food, looking at what they can see with their eyeballs, which is like, hey, Alex is in great shape. She clearly works hard on her physical and mental health. She's having a full slice of cake. But it's like, it's very clear that that's not necessarily a common food for you to be eating, or at least like you can't make the assumption. I don't know if that makes any sense to hear, but often you'll hear people express their beliefs around food onto other people, clearly not considering the lifestyle and decisions that those other people might be making.
Yeah. Also, we are so influenced in that way, but in a more unconscious level with food. I read a study, and I should actually look it up and see if I can cite it. But if you're eating dinner at a table and your friends are small-bodied and they're eating a lot of food, or like, I guess you're more likely to eat more food than if those people were bigger bodied.
Interesting. That makes sense. It does, in a way. Just our, like, your sort of subconscious perceptions of people and beliefs and things like that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's like what you might believe about a certain food is like, okay, this food is high calorie. It is going to make me gain weight. But if I see people who have had success managing their weight, eating these foods, then those foods might be okay. Therefore, I'm going to eat these foods. Versus if you see people who you assume have not had success managing their weight, even though that would be a very unkind and inaccurate assumption, eating these foods, then you might say, ooh, that validates that those foods make weight management impossible. Therefore, I'm not going to eat those foods.
Yeah.
Interesting. The way that we can go there and make assumptions. And also how you can assume, and this is so common, people just connect thinness and health when like thinness and health are not the same thing.
No.
And the pursuit of, and this is the tricky thing, people pursue health and they call it that when really what they're trying to pursue is thinness. And the simple pursuit of thinness often is the antithesis of health.
If you say thinness one more time, you're going to develop a lisp.
Thinness. I think I actually did.
Yeah,
It's
you
permanent
did.
now. I think I have a relatively neutral relationship with food. I think that your relationship with food has improved since I've been around, but just not tooting my own horn.
No, it absolutely has. My relationship with fitness has improved with you. And I think also when you work with other people, it's always easier to take other people's advice than your own. So logically, you can know that something isn't right. Or you can acknowledge and be aware that it's a food rule or that it's impacting your life in some negative way. But it's easier for you to see that in someone else and say, hey, have you noticed this? And try to help that person in a way if they want help versus trying to help yourself. So I think, however, in helping other people, in learning more about other people, in reading about other people's relationship with foods and how they interact with foods, I've been able to develop a more neutral relationship with food as a result.
Yeah.
So it's manyfold.
Yeah.
My mom's relationship with food has improved. That's helped. And surrounding yourself with people with different relationship with food have also helped.
Yeah.
Like, you know, getting out of the CrossFit space helped.
I mean, you had like the CrossFit thing going. You guys all had the like IgG food sensitivity thing going, which that's just another kind of eating disorder.
Well, no, that wasn't a result of like wanting to restrict. It was, we were all so stressed out after losing my sister and my grandma that our GI health was awful.
Yeah.
And so what we did, instead of realizing, oh, maybe we're just really stressed out and we're just generally stressed out people, we did IgG. We cut out a bunch of different foods.
There's overlap. It's like convenient for people who like sort of are susceptible to food rules for like, ooh, here's a super restrictive way of eating that might help your GI symptoms despite there being no real evidence.
I never liked restrictive eating. I never liked that.
No. Yeah. But for some people, there's like the way that they express their disordered beliefs around food can change. And a lot of times it is often in the pursuit of health. It's like, ooh, it's food sensitivities. It's, I have food intolerances, therefore this. And it's like, oh, well, are you celiac? Well, no. Okay.
But what if you know a food really upsets your stomach and you're like, I don't eat that, I'm intolerant. Based on my experience, that's not necessarily a food rule.
No, I mean, like that's quinoa for me. I have like quinoa does
and
not.
grapes.
And grapes. Do I eat those sometimes? Sure. Do I know that there's going to be an impact? Yeah. But there's a big difference in avoiding quinoa and avoiding gluten. Like, you see what I mean? Because you avoid gluten and that conveniently cuts out like a food group almost.
Yeah. A lot of these, like cutting out big food groups, it is worth looking at your lifestyle because it might be stress. I mean, this is a completely other topic, but your like brain health, your mental health, your overall well-being impacts your gut health in an incredible way.
Yeah, I mean, the gut-brain axis is bidirectional. It goes both ways. So
even being stressed about eating a certain food can cause that food to not sit well with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with the contents of the food, except for the fact that you're thinking about it in a way that makes you stressed.
Right. Yes. And that's stress. It's just the power of the mind. And it's really, I mean, if you want to talk science, it's the nocebo effect, which is even more potent than the placebo effect, which is like, if you believe that something will result in a negative consequence or effect, then it will. Just look at people's beliefs about vaccine side effects. That's nocebo. And I should find the study on nocebo effect and put it up, but placebo is a really well-known positive toggle, and you can't negate, I mean, and scientists never would negate the power of the placebo effect. And you see it all the time with sports performance and in medical trials, but nocebo is where you see it have a real negative impact on people's lives. And food is like a very, very common place where nocebo kind of creeps in. But yeah, anyways, the food rules and the sort of disordered mindset tends to shift around and kind of always sort of stays under that like quote unquote health umbrella for a lot of people, when really it's just they need to have some control somewhere, and it allows that to happen.
Yeah.
There's obviously been research done on mindset and on lifestyle and the way that we think about food, and like a food neutral approach, which is also sometimes called like a positive relationship with food, which is just existing, does tend to result in better mental well-being, physical well-being, self-confidence, self-image, all of the things that associate with improved lifestyle and, I guess, life experience, versus forcing, I have a good relationship with food, kind of forcing that, I'm going to label things in this very binary way.
Yeah, I like that. It's funny because when you first brought this up, we were in the kitchen and I was like, ooh, this would be a good podcast topic as we started getting into it. I was trying to compare this good and bad relationship with food, which, I mean, if you want to call it that, you can call it negative or positive or neutral, whatever language you want to use to describe it. But if you ask yourself, okay, well, what is my relationship with money? I think people can, if they really think about it, they can say, oh, it's good or it's bad or it's neutral, or I just think about it in a logical way. I know how much money's in the bank.
Yeah.
Some people maybe have money stress, like I tend to. What I'm spending my money on makes different feelings come up. I can spend $1,000 on one thing and $1,000 on the other thing and feel completely different about spending that money. But I never have really labeled my relationship with money, which I think really drives home the point of the fixation that we have on food in our society, that we go so far beyond even just labeling food that we're labeling our relationship with it.
Yeah. And I think it's partially, most people eat 3 times a day. And so you get 3 opportunities sort of like minimum to assess what it is that you're eating. Whereas, are people checking their bank accounts 3 times a day? Probably not. Like maybe you're spending money here and there, but are you like sitting down and really budgeting 3 times a day? Or
I think that's what makes food so complicated.
It does. Yeah. It offers so many repetitions.
I mean, if somebody has a problem with alcohol, they can get it out of the house. They don't go to bars. They don't put themselves in environments that have alcohol in them as often as maybe they would if they don't have an alcohol problem. Whereas like you can't do that with food.
The addict brain is a little different. And I think that there are people out there who have that brain and don't necessarily struggle with like substances like alcohol. And so I often wonder, like, with quote unquote like dry addicts, are they expressing that brain in a different way? And is it causing problems? I mean, food addiction is not necessarily a real thing in the same way that substance addiction is, but you can absolutely have that brain and have a really problematic relationship with food, or have a really problematic relationship with money or with sex. Like,
I have a few clients that have, and this happened to my mom, smoked for many, many years. At the time that they quit smoking, they started to have what they call an issue with food.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that control. Because, I mean, cigarettes there's so much to that. There's, the obvious like addiction.
Dopamine.
habit. Like it's there's the actual habit of doing it. There's
oral fixation.
So there's a stemming aspect to it. So it checks a lot of boxes. So you take stemming away, you take the habit away, you take the actual addiction away, like the substance, you're left with this huge void.
Yeah.
That really the only thing that can fill that immediately often is like a sort of dopamine driven behavior. So there's your food. Like sometimes people get really, really addicted to like exercise, things like that. Like when you have that thing in your head, you can't really leave a hole. And that's what makes addiction recovery really challenging for people, is you have to sort of a lot of times put something in there to take the place of it, because this is really sort of antsy, uncomfortable feeling. And that's like cigarettes. We're not talking, I mean, that's like very light addiction, which is, I mean, obviously like they kill people. We all know that, but it's hugely problematic. So I think you have people walking around with all kinds of, you know, issues with brains, and like that brain, it's so good at justifying reasons for doing problematic things, even over exercising. I mean, you can take what is on paper a really positive activity, but you know, the dose is what makes the poison. So you can exercise to a point that's really problematic, but a person who's doing that is able to justify that in some way, in the exact same way that people who are addicts to alcohol can. And they convince themselves that everything's fine, they don't have a problem, yada, yada, yada. Like they can sit down and pass a lie detector test. Like that's how pathological this is. So it's hard to rewire that all the time. You know, you can take steps in a positive direction for sure. And
I think awareness is huge.
Yes.
Like, even just if you're somebody like this, and I'm not saying we're the most knowledgeable, we certainly are not on this topic. If you're someone listening to this and it's the first time that you've maybe made this connection, even just knowing that can be helpful. Having like awareness of, okay, why do I love food so much? Why does it make me feel so good? Why do I seek it out so often, more than other people?
Yeah.
This might be why. And even just that can be helpful, because you can sit there and say like, oh, I really want this. You're, you know, maybe you're studying or you're reading something or you're stressed. You're like, I really just need to eat something. You can say, is this actual hunger? Is this, it's going to force you, or at least add a little bit of friction to the next step, which is the behavior or the action. It's not going to like, I guess, you know, make everything easier, but it's awareness is really empowering. Yeah.
I mean, the more you can learn about something and educate yourself on it is a good thing. And that can even get into starting to quantify and understand what's in the food that you're eating. Obviously, like tracking food, calories, macros can be a hugely problematic thing for certain people, but you know, the same tool can be really beneficial for another person. There's a lot to be learned, and you can disarm food beliefs by just looking at them, and how a food that you think maybe used to think is bad will cause, you know, weight gain or whatever the fear is that's created the food rule can actually fit perfectly fine in a day, in a week.
Or something that you originally thought was going to cause you weight gain, and in maybe your brain, poor health, is actually something that is going to fuel your next bike ride. So it's reframing how food serves you.
Yeah, it's like it can demystify it quite a bit. But it's like you have to know yourself and where you're at and when to use that tool and when not to.
And using it in a specific way. Yeah. Because there are different ways to use it, as we talked about in a few podcasts ago.
Right. I mean, everyone is different. For some, you know, a spoon can be a utensil for eating cereal, or it can be a weapon. Like it depends.
I thought you were going to get really like grotesque and be like, a spoon can be for eating, or it can be for
gouging out an eyeball.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that.
I mean,
I'm glad you did. I still wanted you to.
Yeah, I mean, a good tool in the wrong hands is a bad tool.
Yeah.
But I think the language aspect and the way that you talk about things and we talk about things is really important. And, you know, I mean, we've talked about this in the context of relationships and how instead of we talk, you do I talk and me talk and you talk, that kind of thing. And that creates a lot of clarity around what your needs are and what your perspective is, versus we talk is a lot of assuming and unilateral decisions, and it can feel really ugly. But it's the same thing with foods. Like, what if you're like, oh, I ate so much junk? Call foods what they are. Use the name. Stop calling foods good or bad or junk or healthy.
Or cheating.
Or a treat.
It's funny when people, you know, because we nutrition coach and people sometimes log their food. Often, at least my clients are usually logging, and they'll get, well, what do you think of my logs? What do you see? What should I change? What can I improve on? And it's so hard. I mean, it's not hard anymore, but there is a specific way that we try to improve someone's food. And often that's by adding, like, hey, you could use some leafy greens. I'm noticing that you're not really eating those. Let's add these here. Very rarely do we comment on, besides making sure they're getting what they need for their goals, we never nitpick.
No.
We never say like, hey, why did you eat that? If anything, if somebody is working on food neutrality, I might say like, hey, I noticed you had that snack yesterday. How did that feel?
Yeah.
If that's something we're working on, like including those foods, eating them with other people and not by yourself, things like that, where we're talking, that's when you kind of like look at specific foods in their logs.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we try not to pick apart food logs.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different foods and they can all be.
So let's say like if someone says, like, not to talk about food logs, but just to highlight the importance of language. So, instead of saying, I'm going to go have a treat, something like that, you'd say, I'm going to go have a bowl of Haagen-Dazs chocolate hazelnut ice cream because I love it. And the combination of the ice cream with like the chunky chocolate and the hazelnut flavor is something that I really like. And I also enjoy that I often eat it with my partner, Alex, at the end of the day. It's a great way that we connect, we tell stories from the day, and I love that experience. There's the difference. So you name the food, talk about it.
That's essentially answering the question, that third question of how does this impact my wellness?
Yeah. Does this food positively impact my well-being or impact in some way? Yeah. And so it's like, instead of like, oh, I feel so bad eating chocolate ice cream at the end of the day, you shouldn't eat carbs before bed. There's so many places your head can go with this stuff.
For me, treat isn't that bad.
I know, but even if you say it, elaborate on it. Like,
but for some people, it could be also. But yeah, I get that.
But it's like, it's a way to, you honor everything about that food and that experience, even if you used to think, oh, this is bad, I shouldn't do this very often, whatever the belief was, you don't even touch that.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, this is what I'm having and why, and how I'm going to have it, and why I like it, that kind of thing. That's Haagen-Dazs ice cream. The same could be said for foods that have, a special meaning in your family, some sort of cultural meaning in your region or whatever it is, some reason why you eat these foods. You can honor that and find joy in that. Even for a lot of people, in cooking those foods can bring a lot of enjoyment because you get to be a part of the process. But if you're so worried about the food itself, you skip that. You don't even get to feel the joy because you're like, oh, I really shouldn't be baking this, or like, oh, did I have to bake 2 pies or whatever. When like, stop and look at it, those 2 pies are a recipe that's been in your family for 80 years.
Yeah.
And by simply preparing them, like, you're honoring that tradition in your family, memories or whatever makes them special for other people who are going to eat them.
I think a lot of people, when they label a food bad or they call it a treat or a cheat meal, it often ends up becoming a more powerful food for them. Like the food ends up having power over them. They can't control themselves because it is a form of
control.
Yeah, but you're restricting. You're restricting and you never allow yourself to have it. So then when you do finally get it, when it's presented at a potluck or something, then there's this mindset of I need to eat as much as I can because I'm not going to allow myself to have it again ever, or for 2 months, or if whatever it might be.
I need to get my fill of it now because it's off limits after this.
But sometimes I think about, okay, well, what if you took your favorite food, that food that you have no control over? By that, I mean you restrict, and then when it's around, you struggle. What if you just always had that food in your house? Mm-hmm. Like for 6 months, there would just be unlimited donuts in the house.
Yeah.
Your favorite donut, if that's your thing. And you could just eat it whenever you wanted.
Yeah.
Eventually, then, because you're not restricting it, then it like reduces power.
Yeah, you become desensitized.
So people might say, well, I can't do that with every food. Like if it's not donuts, it's going to be something else. But if you can switch your mindset out of that restrictive and scarcity mindset around certain foods, generally, then you'll have more power over them. And it's not like you should have control or power. I'm not using these in a negative way. It's just if you don't have that restrictive and that scarcity mindset around foods, they just are.
Yeah.
And if they're there, you have them. And if you want to buy them, then you do, and you include them in moderation. Then they just don't have that like pull. And then you don't have the guilt after, which makes you even more likely to restrict.
Yeah.
You restrict harder. Maybe you start to generalize into other foods, and then it just becomes an even bigger problem.
Yeah, 2 things on that. So let's take a more simple biological being, not a human. Let's talk about dogs for a second. when a dog has a reaction to something that's negative, the way that you train them through that and out of it is desensitization and counter conditioning. So it's exposing the dog to the stimulus that normally results in a negative reaction and either just desensitizing them to it or even going a step further and creating positive associations with it. And so the difference between a dog and a human, and it's why I struggle with like, oh, well, your dog, you just this. And so therefore their brains are different. Like they don't have foresight the way that humans do. They don't have societal stigma. They don't live with the same set of emotions and ability to make connections that we can. So it's like, it's different, but that's the simple sort of biological conditioning mechanism. A lot of anthropologists, health policy people will point out that a big problem in our society from a food standpoint is excess availability of highly palatable, easy to overconsume foods. So the idea that there can even be a scarcity mindset that people live with is like just false. So, yep, that's all created in our minds. And so if you can say, all right, you know what? We live in a time of great abundance. And is that abundance what creates problems for people? Sure. But because I know that we live in a time of great abundance, I know that I can have donuts whenever I want donuts.
Guess what? You can have Christmas cookies not on Christmas.
Around the clock.
That was like when mini eggs became a thing, like not on Easter.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a second.
But then you're like, no, I don't want them. But that's kind of it. So if you say
100%.
Like, so let's recognize then that like, scarcity mindset, it's a structural issue that we create ourselves because we absolutely, if you live in the Western world, we do not live in a time or a place where we need to worry at all about scarcity. We live in abundance.
Also, you're likely, unless you're a child listening to this, you're an adult. You can get whatever you want.
You can just go to the store and buy it.
Like I get it as a kid, you couldn't just go and get whatever you wanted whenever you wanted
it. Yeah, kid, you have scarcity.
But like as an adult, you can go and
you can take your money and you can go to Krispy Kreme and you can buy hot and ready donuts whenever you want.
I saw a meme that was like, just a reminder that you're an adult and you can have as many cats as you want. And then I like, you think back like, Mom, can we get a dog? Can we get a dog? It's not that different.
No, it still blows your mind that you can get your own animals.
I know, it does. And they just live in my house.
And Rue's still right there. She would like to leave. No, but okay. So you break down the structure of scarcity. That's a really productive thing to do because you can't stock your house with donuts. Like, let's be realistic. That would be hugely wasteful. They would
never be fresh all the time.
You wouldn't want to eat a crusty donut anyways.
I've done it. It's not worth it.
You can't do that. It's a fun mental game. But you can create that situation in your head for sure. By doing that, by saying, I can have donuts whenever I want. Or you're out at a potluck and there's like your favorite dessert that you don't normally make yourself. Whatever it is. You're like, instead of saying like, I'm going to have this and then I'm not going to have it again ever or for 6 months or whatever it is, like whatever the mental gymnastics, you'd be like, I can have this whenever I want, as often as I want, as much as I want. You can mentally stock your pantry with tiramisu if that's the food. You can do that. And in doing that, you remove, like you said, a lot of the power that the food holds over you. And at least like you reduce that sort of magnetic draw towards it. Cause you're like, you know what? It's okay. I'm going to have one serving. And if tomorrow I want more tiramisu, I'll just go get more tiramisu. It's not that big of a deal. I can have it whenever I want. So it's sort of breaking down the structural elements that we put in place that are these really powerful food rules and moving towards that, like, you know what? I eat tiramisu because I love tiramisu. And my grandma used to make tiramisu and it reminds me of home. Mm-hmm. And even bad tiramisu at a company potluck reminds me of that. Yeah. So I'm going to have it and I'm not going to judge it for being bad tiramisu. I'm just going to enjoy the flavor of espresso and chocolate and ladyfingers. And then I'm going to move on with my night. It's not a big deal. And I'm definitely not going to drink myself into oblivion because I'm guilty about eating a pound of tiramisu because I'm not going to eat a pound of tiramisu. I'm going to have one slice. Maybe a half a slice if it's really good.
I think too, when you don't have that thing in your head saying like, oh, I need to eat more, or shouldn't be eating this, or I need to stop, or control yourself, you can actually enjoy what you're eating.
Yeah,
and you don't need more.
You're like, I blacked out. Which like...
You were laughing, but I think that can be true.
Yeah.
Like you're so consumed with all of these things going on in your head and the guilt and the judgment, self-judgment most of the time. No one cares what you're eating.
No.
But a lot of that self-judgment that's just like filling your brain and your body when you're eating the food that you can't even taste it.
I know.
Which is sad.
It is.
I mean, I'm not a tiramisu fan.
I'm not either. I don't know why that's the one that like popped in my head. But it did. Lava cake. But lava cake
I
would
do
be
like a good, I haven't had one in a while.
I know.
They don't have any restaurants here that serve lava cake.
Do you remember the first dessert that we had out after like a year and a half inside with COVID?
Yeah.
Was lava cake.
It was so good. My taste buds exploded.
I actually do think I blacked out. It was just like,
it was one of the best lava cakes we've ever had.
This delicious.
It was at a steakhouse.
It was at Salt Lick.
And my dad, I don't think even got one bite. He was scared. We finished it and just like all looked at each other and started laughing.
Because we realized how ridiculous we all just were.
That was really good.
4 people splitting one
But I think too, that's the downside with splitting something really good.
I know. I was like,
is now it's a race.
I could have just had my own lava cake, but here I am with the Parkers and we're
racing to get your share of it.
We're splitting another dessert. Yeah. And I think what's important to point out, and this goes back to even the IgG thing, is food and diet is only one determiner of health. It's not the sole determiner of health. The one food that you eat, the lava cake, that doesn't determine your health. It's like everything is in a landscape of other things. And there's a lot of factors that are outside of a person's control that impact and determine their quote unquote health, or even their ability to pursue certain toggles for health. Like, a person with kidney disease is not going to be able to eat a high protein diet that might better support their physical goals simply because they can't process it. So that's off limits. That path is not available to them. So we can't always think about health in one specific way because not everyone has access to those ways. But the way that we think about food can impact health in a number of ways that don't necessarily have to do with the way that we look and the way that how much we weigh and, what we're able to do with our bodies. It can impact our mental health, our self-image, our confidence in the world. Those things are really important. But it all starts with kind of taking positive steps towards breaking down some food rules and structures that we put in place. So much for a shorter episode.
I enjoyed that.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite, food experience? I know you said you're not, a person who eats for enjoyment, but...
The one that pops into my brain was... when we went to Las Vegas for my birthday in 2018. And it's funny, I don't really remember much of what we ate. I remember how happy you were. I remember the dessert being delicious. We went to Nobu.
Yeah.
And I remember because my mom had given us some money for it because I was really worried about how much it was going to cost.
Yeah.
And I was trying to save money. So I was trying to really, really enjoy the experience. And it just made you so happy because I know that you really like going out for fancy meals. And that's something we couldn't really do because we didn't have the money. So I would say that, and for a multitude of reasons. And the food was good. It's I remember that sashimi actually.
The yellowtail?
Yeah. The yellowtail had little jalapenos on it.
And little cilantro leaves. Yeah.
That was pretty good. And then I think popcorn shrimp, it's coming back to me now.
The little tofu tuna poppers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or no, not tofu. It's rice in a cube with tuna on top.
Yeah. A lot of my higher culinary experiences, more fancy, are with you. And I just remember being in the restaurant with you sitting across from me. Yeah. I don't remember a lot about the food. Huh. What about you?
It's funny that you mentioned that because I was going to say, I really like the really high-end culinary experiences. And this is just, I think me with everything, I like things that are really special and that are hard to get, that have peculiar stories. I want to know where that fish came from. I want to know why I'm eating that fish. I want to know about the chef. I want to know about the different flavor combinations and why certain vegetables were chosen. Chef's Table, I love that show.
I know. Every time we watch and there's a restaurant featured, you're we need to go there.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm I've been there. But of course I have.
Yeah.
I like that stuff. And I like really great combinations of food and textures and flavors and things like that, but done up and packaged in a way that's really meaningful. And you're also, at the core of a lot of those. But even going to DC with my sister and eating at a really fancy Wolfgang Puck restaurant. I loved that experience. But also it's the restaurant, the person, the place, it's bringing elements of life that I really like together into one experience. All right. Well, great episode, Alex.
Yeah, you too.
And Rue, she's finally settled down. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, feel free to share it. Review the podcast, subscribe, do all those things. And we will be congratulating Alex very soon on a successful...
Oh, I hope so.
...half Ironman race in Indian Wells. So Catch you on the next one.